Today, all of Global comes together for Global's Make Some Noise Day, supporting small charities that need your help more than ever.
For somebody who is seriously thinking, how am I going to pay that bill? The burden on them is massive.
When you go in there, I think the most common thing you'll hear at an Andy's Man Club is, thank God it's not just me.
We very rarely turn people down for beds, and I would never want that reason to be, I'm sorry, I don't have enough money.
Global's Make Some Noise Day on LBC.
One of the small charities Global's Make Some Noise is supporting this year is Bromley Brighter Beginnings, based in South London. It's a volunteer-run charity that helps vulnerable families living in poverty. They provide essential items such as beds, cots, high chairs, buggies, clothes, even shoes for children and their families. Madeline has been volunteering with Bromley Brighter Beginnings for 10 years now. She runs the Bed for Every Child campaign, which provides beds, mattresses and bedding for children living in poverty.
We buy about 180 new beds a year for children, so that's what, 3 a week? This is not including cot beds and toddler beds. We get those second-hand. I think there is a little bit of stigma, as you can imagine, that you might not feel confident to ask for help, but we always treat people with respect, and our volunteers are wonderful at treating people and working with people so that they don't feel any shame. We're all volunteers. We have no running costs whatsoever. We don't pay anyone. We don't pay for storage. Every single penny in our bank goes to help the families that we support. And there's always that niggle of, have we got enough money in the bank account to provide the service that we're currently providing?
To donate £10, £20 or £30 and help Madeline and her colleagues ensure that there is enough money in that bank account, then just text LBC10, LBC20 or LBC30 without any spaces to 70766. That's LBC10, the letters and the number, LBC10, LBC20 or LBC30 without a space to 70766. 100% of your donation will go to Global's Make Some Noise. 16 and over only, please, and do seek the bill payer's permission. Standard network charges may apply. Terms and conditions are at makesomenoise.com.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
6 minutes after 10 is the time. A very good morning to you. It's one of those doubles, I've just realised. It's one of those conversations where there is the what of it and the why of it. So I can't help thinking that the decision by Liz Truss, to block an energy-saving information campaign that Jacob Rees-Mogg had already been persuaded by, had already signed off on. Let's just have a little think about that. It's an astonishing emergence from the blocks, if that's the right phrase, that this Prime Minister has undertaken. She's sort of failed to support her Chancellor. She's under attack from members of the Cabinet, including Penny Mordaunt, and very prominent former members of the various Conservative cabinets of the last few years, most obviously Michael Gove and Grant Shapps. And now she appears to have pulled the Ottoman rug from beneath Jacob Rees-Mogg's well-polished brogues. The Times have this story this morning, which is why I'm sort of struck by it, because the detail is remarkable. It suggests to me that someone quite high up in that department, that business department that Jacob Rees-Mogg heads up, someone quite high up has given chapter and verse to Stephen Swinford, the political editor of The Times. Jacob Rees-Mogg signed off plans for a campaign with a budget in the region of a maximum potential budget of about 15 million quid. That sounds like a lot, doesn't it? Just have a little think about the kind of numbers that have been bandied about in the last few years. I look at the money spent on test and trace. Was that over £30 billion for something that was barely fit for purpose? They promised us 350 million quid a week. The biggest lies about Brexit, such a big lie that he even stuck it on the side of a bus. So that would be every week if the Brexit liars had been telling the truth. Speaking of that, my interview with David Dimbleby on this week's Full Disclosure is very interesting. You would be surprised to learn that his attitude to Brexit is rather more complicated and nuanced than you would gather by reading out a story in the Daily Mail today. Although, of course, the Daily Mail has much bigger problems to worry about than my my criticisms at this point in its history. So Jacob Rees-Mogg signed off on it, and the Times report that Number 10 rejected it because, and here's the deal, here's the crucial phrase, Elizabeth Truss is ideologically opposed to it. Ideologically opposed to public information campaigns. It would have included 3 central pieces of advice about your boiler, about your radiators, and about your heating in general. The suggestion was that we could save up to £300. Work on the campaign was advanced. Plans to recommend turning down the thermostat were rejected after the Department of Health warned of a risk to the elderly. Advising people to turn off lights and electrical appliances and showering instead of taking baths were considered too nannying. I am not thick and I am not uneducated, but I am staggered by the difference in the amount of water used between, for example, a shower and a bath. I find it genuinely arresting information, but apparently it's too nannying for this government. The central tenet, the explicit tenet of the campaign would be to save people money. But of course, the implicit goal would be to reduce demand. We have to reduce demand, not least because there were warnings yesterday that we could be facing 3-hour blackouts if the situation doesn't change sharpish. Internally, it was called the Energy Demand Reduction Campaign. You'll understand now why I said the level of detail in this Times report speaks to me of a fairly senior leak, someone fairly senior, someone who is absolutely across all of the detail, seems to me to have given the wink to Stephen Swinford at the Times on this one. He writes today, I'm told that after months of work on the scheme, it was signed off by Jacob Rees-Mogg and others in recent days. But Number 10 rejected it. It argues that the information is already publicly available elsewhere. Truss has also been clear she does not want to tell people how to live, unless, of course, they are Labour, Liberal Democrats, SNP, podcasters, broadcasters, people in North London townhouses, people who appear on the BBC, climate change protesters, people who protest at the Conservative Party conference about the last Conservative Party manifesto being abandoned, talking heads. That's 10. Have I missed any off that? She's very keen to tell them how to live. She's very keen to tell them to wind their necks in, shut up and just start towing the line. But the argument was apparently that the Prime Minister has an ideological objection to it. One government source has told the Times that it's a stupid decision. The campaign was entirely practical. It was about saving people money. It wasn't about lecturing them. They argue that the cost of the campaign relative to the savings made would render it a no-brainer. And they're obviously right. 11 minutes after 10 is the time. I don't know how interesting it will be this morning for you and me to talk about whether or not this campaign, this specific campaign, which is now unlikely to happen, although I wouldn't rule out a U-turn. I don't know how helpful it would be for us to have a chat about whether or not this campaign, which isn't currently going to happen, would have been a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, we can try. For me, the story that we've unearthed from February of this year, where fire chiefs issued a safety warning to households about the dangers of turning appliances on while you sleep. That's on the one hand. That's from fire bosses in February of this year. And then in the one newspaper this morning, when you open it up, the instruction is to do your washing at night. So to wash clothes at night and earn £10 in plan to avoid blackouts. This is for people with smart meters to get a possible £10 bonus to cut their energy usage at peak times. And one way in which you might do that is by using the washing machine at night, which fire bosses in February warned about. So you tell me we don't need a public information campaign. You've got a double-page spread in the newspaper of record in this country, right across pages 6 and 7, wash clothes at night and earn £10 in plan to avoid blackouts. I go to the Daily Mirror in February of 2022 and I read, as a new trial on peak and off-peak energy gets underway, fire chiefs have issued a safety warning to households, warning of the dangers of turning on appliances while you sleep. So perfectly possible to do the washing at night without being asleep, but the temptation for people will no doubt be to put the washing on while they're having a kip and then either hang it out to dry or stick it in the tumble dryer or drape it over the radiators that probably won't be on anyway, or stick it on one of those nice sort of racks, those nice clothes horses the next morning. That to me seems to be a fairly compelling case for a public information campaign. We've all got public information campaigns that we like. Mine probably involves Charlie the Cat, which was actually turned into a dance music anthem at one point. Was it, who did, no, I can't, was it the Prodigy that did that? It was the Prodigy, wasn't it? Yeah. That's tune-tastic on the show this week. I spoke to Mike Pickering a couple of days ago. I don't know how, I mean, maybe you know more about it than I do. So dust your appliances. Didn't know that. Did you know that? Keep the coils on the back of the refrigerator dust-free to ease pressure on the motor. Did you know that? Did you know that? Keith, you did not know that. Shut up. Keith knew that. Keith does that every year. Don't heat empty rooms. Seems a bit self-evident, but have a think about it. You might not realise it's an empty room. You might walk through it on your way from the sitting room to the kitchen, but you don't actually need to have the radiator on in there because you're not going to sit down and chill, are you? So I just hit my microphone there. That's not encouraged, by the way. That's not up there with dusting the coils on the back of your fridge. Be a canny cook. Use your microwave more. That's the most energy-efficient way to cook. A 10-minute shower uses 25 gallons of water. And who has a 10-minute shower anyway, if you're on your way to work or on your way to school in the morning? You're in there for 3 or 4, aren't you? So you brush your teeth as well. I sometimes do that as a time-saving device. You can have that for nothing, Keith. A life hack, brush your teeth in the shower. Knock a couple of minutes off your morning routine. So did you know that? 25 gallons of water for a 10-minute shower. A 10-minute shower is 25 gallons. Run yourself a bath, 70 gallons. Pretty much 3 times as much water used. And, of course, it's hot water that has been heated that we're talking about. So I didn't know that. And it may sound counterintuitive, but if you leave your blinds and your curtains open for as long as possible until twilight actually falls, you will be able to absorb and enjoy more of the sun's heat and the maximum amount of natural light in your gaff. So I think that a lot of these ideas are really helpful. And a few adverts here and there, including on this radio station, telling you about them would have been a very good idea. And here is a phrase I have never said before, and Jacob Rees-Mogg agrees with me. So do very many members of the government. So once again, and this is where the why of it is possibly more interesting than the what of it, but if you want to ring me about the specifics of a public information campaign, you are very, very welcome to do so on 0345 6060 973. Remember, this is all unfolding against a backdrop of possible rolling blackouts this winter if we cannot import enough energy from Europe. National Grid has warned, just as Number 10 blocks a public information campaign to encourage people to consume less. We can talk about the politics of it. That seems to me to be quite boneheaded. We're receiving warnings that if we don't either get more energy or curtail our usage of energy, we could have 3-hour rolling blackouts across the winter. Is it 1976 that everybody's thinking of? I was only 4, but I have a vague memory of doing stuff by candlelight in the old house in Kidderminster. So how those two go together is something that apparently only Liz Truss understands. We've got a threat of rolling blackouts, but a public information campaign to encourage and help us to curtail our energy usage has received the prime ministerial kibosh. Don't get it. 0345 6060 973. Here's the question. Where does it come from, either psychologically, politically or economically? This hatred of the nanny state. I don't understand it. I really don't. Nannies are a good thing. I'm thinking more of nans, grandmas. I never had one myself, actually. They'd both passed away before I was born. But so you have nannies at boarding school, and they're the people that provide pastoral care. They're the ones in loco parentis. They're the people who look after you. Jacob Rees-Mogg, ironically, still has his living in the family home, I believe. She sort of moved on from him to his children. So nannies are generally good, a bit like do-gooders. What do you want us to be, if not do-gooders? You want us to be bad doers or ambivalents? I don't know. So there's something psychological here, as well as political and or economical. The idea that there is a phalanx, and a lot of it seems to be linked to these bizarre, secretly funded lobby groups masquerading as think tanks that have infiltrated every level of Liz Truss's government. The same people that don't think you should have limits on sugar in fizzy drinks or on advertising of junk food or putting it. So Rees-Mogg disagrees about that, the placing of really unhealthy food in supermarkets. So there are times when the two would agree with each other on the nanny state, but on this they don't. I'm more interested in the bigger picture of where we think it comes from, this antipathy towards caring government. And here's my theory. Okay, you ready? I think that these people, whether they realise it or not, are of the view that because they're okay, because I'm all right, Jack, we shouldn't be spending any money on looking out for people who aren't. This is, I think, an absolute tenet of Liz Truss's professed ideology. I'm all right. Why would we be spending money on looking after people who aren't me? I think this runs through a certain brand of conservatism like Blackpool through a stick of rock. I'm all right. Why would we spend money on that? I'm not obese. Why would we spend money on anti-obesity strategies? I'm not cold. Why would we spend money on energy information campaigns? I'm okay. I'm fine. Why would we spend money on helping people who aren't? I don't live on junk food and fizzy pop. I don't walk past 35 billboards on the way from the nursery to home with my kid calling as we go past each one to have nuggets for tea and a pint of lemonade. So why should we possibly limit the amount of billboards that are importuning our children to pour poison and unhealthy products down their neck every meal? I don't need any educate. Why do we have educate? I don't need a police force. I've never been a victim of crime. Why have we even got police forces? I'm being simplistic, maybe. But of all the things I hate, I think I hate this most. Because what it does is take privilege and turn it into something that's never enough. It takes advantage, it takes good fortune, it takes serendipity, and it takes privilege. And it tells the people who possess it that they deserve more. And the people who've got less don't deserve any help at all. And of course it comes back to these ghoulish think tanks, always talking about tax and free markets and libertarianism, because we don't know who funds them. But you can be fairly confident that the people who fund them are on the hook for quite a lot of tax. And they don't want to be. They want to pay less tax, which means they don't want to be paying to look after you or your children or the rest of us. They don't need it. They don't even need an NHS, thank you very much. We can quite easily pay for our own healthcare and our own medicine. Why on earth should my taxes be used to pay for yours? And that's what I think is going on. You are more than welcome to contradict me, agree with me, or put some flesh upon the bones of my thinking. And you can do so by dialing 0345 6060 973. Why would Liz Truss be, quotes, ideologically opposed, end quotes, to helping us all cut our energy usage in a country facing rolling blackouts within months? It's 10:21. So it's a phrase, isn't it? Ideologically opposed. And I don't look at Liz Truss and see someone who has really thought things through. I'll give you some remarkable evidence of that. There's a historian in America who she has cited as her favourite. She has mentioned in interviews that this fella, Richard Pearlstein, I think his name is her favourite historian. And guess what he has said in response? And this is actually incredible. I can't remember anything like this happening before. He has said in response that her failure to understand his work is so epic as to be mind-blowing. So the woman who's ideologically opposed to an information campaign on energy usage has taken the work of a historian called Rick Pearlstein, who's written about Reagan and Nixon, and described her misreading of his analysis as mind-blowing. So even the stuff that her ideology, such as it is ostensibly built on, is stuff that she has completely misunderstood to a mind-blowing degree. He's described himself as flabbergasted by the conclusions she has drawn. I feel terribly, terribly guilty, he has said. I did my best to explain that the ideas that she's proposing were terrible for the United States. If another country that didn't have America's advantages of having the reserve currency of the world would adapt it, it would be in many ways 10 times worse. He was told in August that her remark in an interview last year was being used to bolster her leadership credentials. He's described it as a weird experience. The idea that someone will come up across the account that I offer of the cynicism, intellectual vacuity, and just basic emptiness of the promises that were made by Ronald Reagan in this regard and say, jolly good, this is what I'm going to try for England, is kind of mind-blowing, he said. I think we might be returning to this theme because I find it mind-blowing for a whole Different reason. 10:25 is the time. The ideological opposition to helping people reduce their energy usage in a country where many can't afford their current levels and where rolling blackouts could be a fact of life by winter. Xavi is in Ceredigion in West Wales. Xavi, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. I think it's running towards a negligent government that they want to sell it as freedom for the people, so that they've got no responsibilities whatsoever in Westminster. They'll just let the people crack on.
Why would you want to be Prime Minister? I mean, we've gone quite deep quite early here, Xavi. I like it. Why would you want to be Prime Minister if you were not going to do any governing? Oh, in order to get rid of all the governing, I suppose.
Forgive me, I'm a bit paranoid when it comes down to the charter cities and investment zones.
Yes, let's just talk about what we're talking about today, if we can. I'm not averse to conversations about charter cities and investment zones, but we're not. I mean, you know, we might as well talk about Kidderminster Harriers' chances at Farsley Celtic tomorrow. It's as relevant to the question about ideologically opposed to energy information campaigns. What's the problem with them?
The freedom of the people. You choose what you want to do, and you suffer the consequences. So when we tell you that you've got no power, it's your choice that you didn't look after yourselves well enough in the first place. They just don't want to take responsibility for the adverse effects. That
doesn't quite work, does it? Because they're going to have to take more responsibility for it now if things go horribly wrong, if people perish, if people really suffer after they've put the kibosh on a public information campaign designed to help them. They're going to be a lot more exposed to criticism and condemnation than if they had actually gone ahead with a plan that I keep returning to the remarkable fact that Jacob Rees-Mogg signed off on. Jacob Rees-Mogg, in many ways, the patron saint of people who believe that because they're all right, nobody else deserves any help. Possibly High Office has focused his mind upon the fact that the welfare of people other than him should be at least somewhere on his to-do list. Anthony's in Bletchley Park. Anthony, what's going on?
God, I wish I knew. I think it's Project Ostrich, James. If she allowed Jacob Rees-Mogg's plan to see the light of day, in essence, is a mission of huge policy failure and opens them to a major attack on their agenda, because what the counterattack would be is after 12 years, we've got cold people, obese people, ill people, protesting people, and people who are about to see the power being turned off as a result of a failure over the last 12 years to come up with a coherent strategic energy plan. So by denying the public the information that they require, in essence, I think what Truss is saying is that there is no problem. I will put my head in the sand, and we will not allow anybody to question the narrative that they are promoting, that everything is fine in Tinselland, but it simply isn't. It's a lie. It's another lie.
So a public information campaign is bad PR for the government, according to Liz Truss's analysis of the situation. It's good PR according to other people's, or at least it's good politics. Good politics, but bad PR.
Absolutely, because if she actually if she allows the campaign to run, what's the first thing people like you or other highly intelligent people are going to turn around and say?
Thank you, I'll take that, but I don't know if I deserve it. Carry on.
Well, I thought I might get an extra 10 seconds ranting. Cheap day. But the way I see it is that if we go back, I'm old enough to remember the 70s and the power cuts and doing history homework around candles. If that happens again, people are simply going to turn around and say, Liz Truss has pulled us back to the 1970s. And even if she said, well, it wasn't me, it doesn't matter, because politically she's dead in the water.
But a public information campaign, a successful public information campaign, I think I'm going to challenge you like I did the last lad, because a successful public information campaign would be better for her, because we're more likely to make the points about returns to the 70s and failures of government if we're in blackouts. If the more blackouts there are, the bigger the problem. The more public information campaign reaches the parts that other information doesn't reach, the smaller the impact of the crisis.
Can I counterattack your counterattack?
You may. Quickly, though, because the headlines await.
You're presupposing Liz Truss is being sensible, rational, and has a coherent view of what's going on. Yeah,
and that's why they use the phrase ideologically opposed, because, of course, an ideology can be completely divorced from reality, as Brexit continues to teach us. 10:30 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Thank you, Anthony. Dominic Ellis is here with your headlines. 10:34 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So Liz Truss has put the kibosh on a £15 million public information campaign to help everybody in the country use a bit less energy, or a lot less energy, or just less energy. This is against a backdrop of warnings yesterday that we face 3-hour rolling blackouts come the winter. Think about that. Everything's off. Your freezer, everything's off. Why? The answer, we are told, is because she is ideologically opposed to the idea and doesn't like telling people what to do, which will come as news to members of the Anti-Growth Coalition.
I will not allow the Anti-Growth Coalition to hold us back.
So you are telling us what to do. You're telling us to stop holding you back, even though we're not, and we don't really exist. Or do we? Who's in this
Labour,
coalition?
The Lib Dems, the SNP, the militant unions, the vested interests dressed up as think tanks, the talking heads, the Brexit deniers, Extinction Rebellion, and some of the people we had in the hall earlier.
So she doesn't like telling people what to do, apart from these people. Here's the fact.
They prefer protesting to doing. They prefer talking on Twitter to taking tough decisions. They taxi from North London townhouses to the BBC studio to dismiss anyone challenging the status quo.
She doesn't like telling people what to do. But stop using Twitter. Stop living in houses in certain parts of London. How does she feel about podcasts?
From broadcast to podcast, they peddle the same old answers.
David Dimbleby on Full
It's
Disclosure
always
this week, by the
more
way.
taxes, more regulation, and more meddling. Wrong, wrong, wrong.
But she doesn't like telling people what to do, does she? It's increasingly less surprising, isn't it, that one of Liz Truss's favourite historians has said that the Prime Minister has completely misunderstood his work. I think possibly that's dog bites man. Man bites dog would be her understanding something. Emma is in Newport. This isn't of great interest to anybody listening, but we're having some problems with our switchboard, so well done for getting through, Emma. What would you like to say?
Hi, I have to say first, I love when you do commentary on their speeches. It's so funny.
It's an acquired taste, I think. I can't do it all the time because some people actually want to hear the speech, apparently. I know. Go on.
I did. I noticed that she was the only one to go to comprehensive, but you know, I think it's just. I said to the research, I said that it's her only success as she sees it. It's her energy support is the only success that she could say, look, we're helping people, we're helping people, we're helping people. And then in the hustings, she categorically so many times said there will be no rationing, there will be no blackout.
She did, yes.
And then when Rishi was asked, he said, we can't rule it out.
Did he?
So why is she going to say, oh, well, you need to do these things because there might be a consequence if you don't?
France unveiled a 50-page plan to save energy yesterday, fronted by 9 ministers, with TV adverts urging consumers to help, and it begins in the next few days.
But that's France.
I know.
She's only just made friends with them.
Did you see the photograph?
Yeah.
The leaders of 44 countries. Liz Truss could not be more on the fringes of this photograph, even if she'd sort of asked to be. It's quite breathtaking. So just.
But she still said that, you know, this isn't part of the EU. We're just going there to discuss how they can support themselves because we're fine.
So here's the bit I don't get, and you're the second caller to make this, which suggests that it's me that's missing something rather than you two. But if we have blackouts and rationing and things go really badly, that's worse for her than if we don't. Or the worse that is, the worse it is for her. So by not having a camp... Go on.
Because she's based on Thatcher. She stood up on stage and said schools and education was terrible in the 80s and 90s, and at the same time said Thatcher's amazing. It is, do not believe what you always say it, do not believe what you're seeing, do not believe what you're hearing with your own ears, your own eyes. This all is well.
There's a cognitive
and then
dissonance.
Blame someone else.
Schools are awful but also brilliant, because I'm the first Prime Minister that went to one and I got into Oxford. There is a crisis, but there isn't a crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm helping you, I'm helping you, I'm helping you.
I'm not going to do anything, but I'm helping you.
Yeah. We're capping you at 2,000. We're not capping you, sorry, but we're capping you. And you know, and everyone will say, and the front page of the Mail will say, Liz Truss, you know, can you imagine if it said U-turn or Liz Truss is helping us through this dark time? I mean, I think that's a fun as well, but...
No, I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you, Emma. I mean, there is a confusion here. For me, I mean, not for Emma. There is a confusion here, but of course it is perhaps a confusion that is diffused by pointing out that she doesn't understand stuff. One of her favourite historians has said that she has completely misunderstood his work while even using it as a basis for policy making. So we sit here and say, what's the ideology? What is the idea? What possible ideology says that with an energy crisis on the horizon and blackouts are a very real possibility, now is not the time to spend a few quid on telling people how they can reduce their energy usage? And that's why the story from France, I think, is interesting, where a 50-page document, which is going to take a little bit more than just telling you to have a shower instead of a bath, fronted by 9 ministers, is making its way around the country. It's a strange set of affairs. Neil is in South Hams in Devon. Neil, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, Neil.
This is going back a little bit to COVID, but I think it kind of demonstrates...
God, imagine if this lot had been... I mean, Johnson was bad enough, but imagine if we'd had a Prime Minister who was ideologically opposed to public information during COVID.
Well, a friend of mine, I own my own website company and I do SEO, so I manipulate what you get to see on the internet.
What?
My friend does...
Well, can you do a better job, please? I'm trying to find some new knitwear, and all I ever get sent is cardigans. Carry on.
He does social media. He manipulates social media for his clients. He won't mind me saying this, but
Sure.
he charges £500 a tweet to manipulate and reach people for his clients. Okay, so he's good at what he does.
Clearly,
he approached the government during COVID. Because they were looking for people to do social media for them, and he had to walk away. He offered his services for free, and he had to walk away because the messaging was so poor, organisation was so poor, and they really weren't that interested in how this could work for them. And it's almost like, I wouldn't say ideologically they're opposed to it; they're just stuck in the dark ages.
So you think they just don't get it?
Yeah.
Well, she says she's ideologically opposed to it, so we have to give it some credence, don't we?
Well, yeah, but if I came to you and said, I know you've got, 1 million followers thereabouts?
I try not to mention it.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
So, if I said to you, I could get one of your tweets to reach 30 million people, and it was of importance, say like your Make Some Noise campaign.
Yeah.
You'd go, do you know what?
Go on then.
That's probably worth the investment. Yeah. So why would nobody have if you're of sound mind, you'd go, do you know what? This is important. We can reach more people.
Yeah, okay, so it's cock-up versus conspiracy again, isn't it? We often find ourselves coming back to these two things. And it is a different administration now from the one that your friend walked away from. What was his... I mean, and he would have been dealing with civil servants more than with politicians, perhaps? I don't know.
He did have to deal with some politicians, but he was predominantly civil service. But he got frustrated by what he could do for them.
And they wouldn't do it.
Again, for free, and the lack of acceptance that was possible, even though he would provide, this is what I can do, and provide them figures. So, Twitter analytics.
I'm in a surprisingly contrary mood this morning. I didn't think there'd be much contradiction going on during this hour, but I think you're the fourth caller now that I'm going to challenge on this, because I don't doubt what you've told me, but I think that on this, Liz Truss genuinely objects to the idea, and I know your mate was going to work for nothing, but that's anomalous, isn't it? That Liz Truss genuinely objects to telling people what to do. This phrase nanny state, this meaningless Tufton Street imbued phrase that is really just designed to fetishise wealth, to fetishise unaccountable, unregulated wealth. She honestly believes...
telling people. It's not telling people what to do. No, it's not. It's giving them the information to let them make a decision, and that's a difference.
Yeah, well, you know that, and I know that, but she doesn't. That's like, we're back to the fizzy drinks, aren't we? We're back to the fizzy drinks and the sugar tax and the junk food, is that they claim it's freedom of choice, but it's not freedom of choice if there's a £2 billion advertising campaign for the junk food and no advertising campaign at all for kale.
Yeah.
It's not a free choice, is it? But so you're right. You are giving them information, but you're giving them information in the hope of influencing their behaviour. It's as if she's objecting to the very idea of advertising. But she isn't, of course. She's objecting to government money being spent in almost opposition to the worst excesses of advertising, the encouragement of people to live beyond their means, to make themselves ill, to consume. This is the Tufton Street mantra. And you're right. I mean, the idea that they would also perhaps lack the wit to realise how things could be achieved, how things could be done, is going to be part of the process as well. Neil, thank you. Can I squeeze in Michael? We've got a lot on the show today because of Make Some Noise Day, so I think we'll probably crack on and we'll come back to Michael a little later if that's all right. I haven't quite got to the bottom of it, and possibly I'm doing that thing I often do. I'm being far too generous, open-minded and kind towards Conservative politicians. Maybe she is just sort of a bit soft in the head. When she talks about being ideologically opposed to something, it would be like a caller on this programme talking about political correctness or wokeness or Brexit. I'm ideologically opposed to it, or in favour of it in the case of Brexit. And as soon as you start asking why, Liz Truss, just like many of our callers over the years, would fall apart completely because no one ever asks them why. Why are you ideologically opposed to helping people use less energy at a time when we're facing rationing and blackouts? Well, because I don't like telling people what to do. Well, you're not telling them what to do. You're just giving them the information they need to make a more informed and possibly positive choice. Well, I let me be clear. I deliver. But so what is it you actually believe? Well, I don't believe in the nanny state. What's wrong with nannies? Nannies look after people. Nannies are great. You're friends with Jacob Rees-Mogg. He's still got a nanny. What's wrong with nannies? Well, it would be like that, wouldn't it? If I could ever get near her. You just ask her questions about what the words she uses mean. I don't like the nanny state. What's a nanny state? Well, it's a state that gives people advice. Right, like, I don't know, wear a seatbelt, don't smoke, don't drive at 150 miles an hour up the motorway when there's no police around or camera. Well, I mean, what advice is bad? What advice is bad? What public information is negative, Prime Minister? Don't live on sweets. Oh, I see. You don't need this advice. So you don't think anyone else deserves to receive it. It's not really an ideology. That's what one might call the anti-growth coalition. No, hang on. That's not right. The anti-greed coalition has a certain ring to it. I think I might actually get a membership badge. It is 10:49. As you have probably noticed, today is Global's Make Some Noise Day. It's one of the best things about the company that I work for over the last few years, getting involved in this massive fundraising drive that focuses very carefully and very directly on charities that are not household names, that don't necessarily get to the front of the queue when we're wondering about where we might be able to direct any spare cash that we want to do good work. We work across 4 key areas: providing shelter and safety, supporting physical and mental health, preventing isolation, and improving life skills. There are, I think, 100 small charities this year getting help, including food banks, mental health and domestic abuse helplines, carer support, community projects and employment programs. I'll tell you how you can help support the drive shortly. But I want to introduce you now to a remarkable woman who has set up a charity, a national charity, parenting mental health, after a very grim experience of seeing her own teenage daughter decline into depression, anxiety, and even suicide attempts. And Suzanne Alderson being stunned, I think, by how hard it was to find help.
Absolutely, James. Thanks for highlighting the plight of so many of the parents who've got a child with a mental health issue. I think, we don't talk about it because we feel such shame.
There's stigma still, isn't there?
There's such stigma, yeah. We feel that it's in some way our fault. So getting help is unbelievably difficult. I think we were very fortunate when Izzy became depressed in 2015 that we got care quite quickly. I mean, unfortunately, she had to disclose that she was going to end her life.
That's one of the things with CAMHS, isn't it? That unless there is that imminent threat, you don't get escalated. They don't. I mean, only because they're so horribly oversubscribed. Everyone who works at CAMHS would much rather the situation were different. But until life is endangered, they simply don't have the resources to get involved.
Absolutely. And we also see that a lot of young people and their families are actually turned away from services because even if they are suicidal, there just isn't the capacity. So we think there are amazing staff in CAMHS doing wonderful work. but the system is oversubscribed. The thresholds for care are rising all the time to meet the enormous demand. And we just think that actually parents are part of the key to supporting this if the funding isn't there. And I think systemically, we're looking at this, it's a relational problem. It's not a transaction like a broken leg. So we need to look at it really differently. And that's why Parenting Mental Health supports parents to support their children.
And in what sort of circumstances do people turn to you? Do people turn to the charity?
Well, in every circumstance, James. I think we have parents who have got a child who is starting to display signs of anxiety, who can't maybe go to school. We've got parents who have got children who are inpatient in long-term care, psychosis, chronic depression, multiple suicide attempts. So really we support parents, whatever their child is facing, because we know that it doesn't matter how bad your child is. The impact on you as a parent is pretty much the same.
And that is crucial, isn't it? Because someone used a phrase to me once that I've never forgotten. They said a parent can only ever be as happy as their unhappiest child. And because you are so busy supporting and helping and trying to find official help and unofficial help and trying to solve these riddles and trying to make your baby happy and trying to deal with all of these things, it's very, very easy to neglect yourself.
Oh, it definitely is. I mean, we run listening circles for some of our parents. They're not therapeutic. They're just a space where they can be heard. Yeah. And we see the difference. Over 6 sessions, their mental health improves by 75%. They feel 77% more comfortable and confident dealing with a professional. So actually what this does is it just changes, it challenges, I think, every part of being an adult and all the things that you think you should be able to do, like go to work or have relationships with family and friends. Everything is challenged. So, and I don't think we talk about this.
We definitely don't, because it infiltrates every single level of your life, I suspect, because you could get a call at any time. They may not be at school, which means that you can't go about your daily life. Even on the days when they can get themselves into school, they may need to come out early and you have to get involved in that. Schools are not always very helpful. Schools can sometimes be very unsympathetic about the invisible illnesses in a way that they would never be unsympathetic about a visible physical illness. And that's why your book, as well as your charity, you've written a book, Never Let Go, How to Parent Your Child Through Mental Illness, is so powerful and so important. We'll talk in a moment about the course that people are going to donate money to help support in a moment. But before we do that, a bit about you. Why did you do this? Why did you... I mean, I know there was a gap that you saw and that you experienced, but why not just concentrate on the micro, on looking after Izzy, looking after yourself, looking after the family, and then maybe years later getting involved in something like this? But you've kind of had all these plates spinning at the same time.
Well, there was a little bit of a gap.
Yes.
I mean, it was about 9 months after Izzy first attempted suicide that I set up a Facebook community, which now supports around 30,000 parents. But I think for me it was the case...
Say that again, how many?
30,000 parents.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I think when we got to 300, I just couldn't believe it that there were 300 families that we were supporting, and now it just feels a bit surreal. And we know that it's just the tip of the iceberg as well. But I think for me, I was compelled. I just couldn't believe that not only that we were the only parents going through this, but also that nobody was talking about it. And there was no support. There was no understanding that if you are a parent and your child is ill, mentally unwell, then that will have an impact on you and your family and other children and your ability to work. So I just felt that actually what I wanted to do was give parents a place where they could explore without judgment. They could get compassionate care and understanding, but also that I saw that as we changed the way that we parented Izzy, that parents had such a role to play. And it wasn't just a case of, let's get through this. This was an adversity that could change you positively as well, not to diminish any of the pain that we all go through.
For sure.
But actually it was an opportunity too.
And that's so beautiful because nobody else gets it.
Nobody
even
gets
loving family members, even grandparents sometimes, even uncles and aunts, nobody gets it until you've been through it. And you can feel so alone. So alone. And that's why I suspect your Facebook group exploded in the way that it did. So we at Global's Make Some Noise are going to fund a Parenting Mental Health's Lived Experience Volunteer Skills and Empowerment Project. The plan is to organise, train and empower volunteers. And the volunteers will have the lived experience of parenting a child with a mental health problem. So how does that How does that work?
Well, we're volunteer-led as an organisation, so all these amazing parents who might have been up all night sitting with their child who's suicidal or who might be dealing with anxiety around going to school will then come and volunteer their time to support other parents, which I just think is phenomenal. Our volunteers really are the power behind what we do. And what we wanted to do is what we see that so many parents lose so much through this experience. I've talked there a little bit about that benefit from adversity that you can gain, but also there's so much that you lose. You might have to give up work. We've got, highly professional, highly trained people who now cannot work because they're having to sit at home with their child supporting them through this illness. So what we want to do is to take these amazing parents on a bit of a journey of transformation, to give them the skills and support so that they can support other parents that are going through it, to make the best of their lived experience. It's painful, it changes you forever, but actually, why don't we make something good come out of this? And when we hear people talking about the community and the impact it has, people say, you saved my life, you changed my life. And for me, I just think, wow, the sky's the limit for our parents, because once you've faced your child's poor mental health, seriously, nothing else scares you.
It does. It gives you a superpower. You've stared into the abyss, particularly when you thought you're going to lose them. You've stared into the abyss, and after that, everything is doable. Nothing is quite as terrifying. I checked with Suzanne before that both her and Izzy would be comfortable about me sharing this, because she's out of the woods, isn't she? She's recently graduated university and even illustrated the book that you've written, Never Let Go, how to parent your child through mental illness. So even the stories are inspirational. All of these parents have the will and the desire to help others, but the charity gives them the tools that they need to do it most effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think hope is the thing that when you're sat at home, when you can't get in to see CAMS maybe for 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, where school are asking you when your child's going back and they literally can't go back. It's not they won't go back, they can't go back. Yeah. You need somebody to say, it's okay, I've been there. And we hold out that hand to parents and we hopefully give them hope and give them compassion and care and support and a place to be.
Brilliant charity, and you're a brilliant person.
Thank you, James.
And I want you to donate, obviously, and I want you to help now if you can. You can donate £10, £20 or £30 to Global's Make Some Noise, which is supporting lots of charities, including parenting, mental health. You can text LBC 10, LBC 20 or LBC 30, no spaces, to 70766. That's LBC 10, 10, LBC 20 or LBC 30, without a space, to 70766. 100% of your donation will go to Global's Make Some Noise, 16 and over only. Seek the bill payer's permission. Standard network charges may apply, and terms and conditions are at makesomenoise.com.
Today, all of Global comes together for Global's Make Some Noise Day, supporting small charities that need your help more than ever. Global's Make Some Noise Day on LBC.
One of the small charities Global's Make Some Noise is supporting this year is Bromley Brighter Beginnings, based in South London. It's a volunteer-run charity that helps vulnerable families living in poverty. They provide essential items such as beds, cots, high chairs, buggies, clothes and shoes for children and their families. Their campaign, A Bed for Every Child, will provide beds, mattresses and bedding for children living in poverty, children who would not otherwise have any of that. To donate £10, £20 or £30, because they need your help now, just text LBC 10, LBC 20 or LBC 30 without a space to 70766. That's LBC 10, LBC 20 or LBC 30 without a space to 70766. 100% of your donation will go to Global's Make Some Noise, 16s and over only. Please seek the bill payer's permission and standard network charges may apply. Full terms and conditions are at makesomenoise.com.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 4 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. As a doctor I follow on Twitter called Dr. Dan Goyal, a medic, researcher, citizen. He's just sent me a tweet preparing for a winter that could be harsh on your health. And there's lots of advice there about things you could do to deal with multiple challenges heading this way. Winter infections, oversubscribed health services, expensive food and heating, energy, more people falling, particularly older, vulnerable people, and likely a significant COVID wave. And some of the stuff is really interesting. So, prepare your cupboards. If you're on the underweight or the frail side, concentrate on high-calorie food that can sustain you, because you burn a lot of calories in the cold. A good breakfast is crucial. Porridge is ideal, preferably full-fat milk. Add cream if you can, or a spoonful of peanut butter. Hydrate more in the morning if you want to try and avoid nighttime waking. Tea is good, but water in there as well. And loads and loads and loads of advice there. And I'm retweeting the thread so that you can see it on my account immediately. That's at Mr. James O.B. And that is just public information, which Dan has taken it upon himself to do that independently, which is a public service. Liz Truss has taken it upon herself to stop her government from doing it governmentally. She is not providing the money, or she has kiboshed, she has nixed plans signed off by Jacob Rees-Mogg, a man who accused humans who died in Grenfell Tower of lacking common sense. I mention that because he is not historically someone that you would ever associate with the word caring or compassionate. His track record of callousness is quite spectacular, but he apparently recognises the need, the wisdom, and I don't know if it's motivated by compassion or care. It's probably motivated by money, by the knowledge that the less energy people use, the smaller the problems will be come the winter, and therefore a £15 million expenditure on a campaign to encourage us to use less energy is actually going to pay for itself several times over in the context of its impact on both the economy and the energy supply. But Liz Truss has turned on it. Liz Truss has closed it down. Liz Truss has rejected it. And I don't understand why. I still don't understand why. We've had some good answers. And my eternal reluctance to conclude that it's just because she's stupid. I don't think she is stupid, even if one of her favourite historians has described himself as absolutely mind blown by her complete failure to understand his work, even as she uses it to justify some of her policy making. Maybe she is, but I'm always uncomfortable reaching too early for a conclusion like that. So what other answers can there be? Well, we are told that it's ideological. She's ideologically opposed to providing people with information that allows them to make healthier choices, or encourages them to make choices that are better for the individual and the population as a whole. Why would anybody be ideologically opposed to that? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060973. I mean this. Beyond energy, beyond this winter, beyond this government, beyond this woman, what is it that these people find so toxic about the idea that it's good to look after the population, that it's good for a government to prioritise the welfare of the people they govern? That it's good for a government to protect the lives and the health of the people they govern. There were objections to seatbelt legislation. There really were. You have to, depending on what age you are, you have to look it up to believe it. There were people who were furious about government expenditure on anti-smoking campaigns, never mind actual legislation. Smoking bans brought in public spaces. Well, younger people find this impossible to believe, don't they? But you'd go to a pub or a nightclub, even if you smoked, you'd be staggered. The sheer fug of it. The way your clothes would reek. Absolutely. You can still see it very occasionally. They should probably be listed now. Some pubs, some uncherished pubs that still have yellow ceilings because they haven't been painted in 30 years. There was resistance to that. And where do you think the resistance came from? The tobacco industry. And you think they did it publicly, or do you think they bunged money to secretly funded think tanks? Google it. You won't be surprised by what you discover. So where does it come from? Well, the vested interests, obviously. But what are the vested interests here? The energy companies don't want us to be overusing energy. They don't actually want blackouts. I'm sure they'd like us to use a bit less energy for this period, for the period of the information campaign. Where does it come from? This belief that it is not the job of government to look after the population. Where does it come from, and why does it get so much traction? And if you fancy it, does it happen in other countries? Or is it, as with so many other things, just going to be happening in countries where Rupert Murdoch controls the media and right-wing politicians have had a pretty free run at everything for over a decade now? 10 minutes after 11 is the time. Michael is on the Roseland Peninsula in Cornwall. Michael, what would you like to say?
Hello. Well, quite exciting being on the radio.
I hope it lives up to expectations, Michael.
Yeah. I think Truss is in trouble at the moment, and what she doesn't want, above all, is a lot more media voices in an authoritative manner laying out a problem, and the idea that there might have to be measures taken to reduce energy is a problem, and that can turn into a problem for her.
But blackouts are a bigger problem, aren't they?
Yes. I think blackouts will be a bigger problem, but blackouts.
She's gambling. They might not happen.
They're down the track, and also down the track, I think what she has her eyes on is the situation in the Ukraine,
right,
and escalation in the Ukraine. And escalation in the Ukraine would enable Truss to kind of fulfil the promise of those pictures of her in a tank. And
this is quite brutal, mate. This is very cynical.
All of that war leadership thing, and
right.
the Falklands effect that kind of saved Thatcher would also, I think, save Truss.
Okay.
So I think she's holding out for events on kind of off stage over in Ukraine.
But why would a public information campaign on energy usage accelerate any escalation in Ukraine?
Well, it wouldn't.
No,
it wouldn't. But
that's where you lost me a bit.
No, what a public information programme about energy usage would do would be give her another headache, and at a time when she's really weak.
Yes, okay. I think you're probably...
She doesn't want that.
No, this is where I'm departing from the consensus this morning, which doesn't often happen. This idea that the public information campaign would be bad for her, whereas because people would blame her. She's only been there 10 minutes. She could quite easily say, God, look at what I've inherited. In fact, she spent most of her conference speech saying, God, look what I've inherited from 3 successive governments that I was a cabinet minister in. She doesn't say that bit out loud, but it might well play. Look what I've inherited. We've got to do this. We've got to really move fast to mitigate the impact of these problems on the horizon. Here's a public information campaign. If even Jacob Rees-Mogg is up for it, you'd think that any claim of ideology would be out the window, wouldn't you? That's the bit I don't get. It's how is it so bad? Surely the problems are worse for her than the campaign designed to mitigate the problems.
I think she would see it as another kind of anti-growth coalition voice. Kind of
just anyone who denies it's reality again, isn't it? Anyone who points at reality rather than at mythical sunlit uplands and unicorn deliveries is somehow not ideologically pure enough for the cause. Where the bigger picture, and you may not have a view on this, you don't have to answer it, but the bigger picture, this idea that governments exercising, behaving, spending money to protect, safeguard, improve the lives of the population, the idea that that's toxic, where does that come from?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Well, we'll continue to ask, Michael, until we find out. Did it live up to your expectations being on the radio, or was it a bit anticlimactic?
Well, my heart's banging like nobody's business.
Like the clappers.
Yeah,
good.
Great.
Well, thank you. Well, make a habit of it. Come one, come all. 11:13 is the time. Sarah is in Wimborne in Dorset. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Well, for me, I just think they're so divorced from real life and real people with their rich backgrounds. She's been in government for 10 years,
yes.
In the higher echelons, and they don't get real people. They don't mix with them, and they've got no common sense as well in terms of, like with COVID, take vitamin C, take your vitamin D. Why can't they put these public health messages out? It's mad. Totally mad, isn't it?
Well, except it can't just be that, can it? Because everyone else has signed up to this. No one's more out of touch with the lived experience of most of the population than Jacob Rees-Mogg, and he gave it the green light a couple of days ago, only to see Downing Street block it. So
really, that's a change, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So
did he really, or was it just a game for them? They play these little games, don't they? That some of them do and some of them don't. It's all a game.
It's more than a game. There is a mission here. There's a mission to reduce the amount of government that we have. They talk about it, don't they? They talk about small state, and then you say, what's the state for? And you think, well, it's for looking after the population. It's for protecting us. You might be able to find a few things that most of us would agree we probably shouldn't be spending public money on. But the idea that they then become sort of gateway drugs for getting rid of the NHS or getting rid of the police service or the army or public information campaigns, it just seems ridiculous to me. It just seems ridiculous and dangerous.
It is.
I don't get it. Where does it end? We're going to get rid of lifeguards because we all know how to swim. And anyone who doesn't, well, it's their own fault that they jumped into the water unprepared. 0345 60 973 is the number you need. Thank you, Sarah. It's 11:15. 18 minutes after 11 is the time. And it is this line here. I keep coming back to it. This line that she's ideologically opposed to telling people what to do. Now, I've got a bit of a blockage, I think, on this. Well, what is the job of a government? Not to tell us what to do, as in, I don't go, just keep off the grass. But to say, oh, did you know, by the way, that a 10-minute shower uses 25 gallons of water, but if you run a bath, it's 75 gallons of water. And we're trying to save not just water, but more importantly at the moment, energy. The energy you need to heat that water. There's 3 times more of it in a bath than there is in a shower. How is that telling people what to do? Okay, turn the radiators off in the spare room, all right? If you've got a spare room, turn the radiators off in the spare room. You don't have to. They're not going to send the police around to your house with tasers to check your radiators. Oh, over here, Sarge. This one's lukewarm. Sorry, officer. I mean, what is the emotional threat that Liz Truss feels from information? This is fascinating to me. I hope I'm communicating my fascination to you. How is it telling people what to do when you give them information that informs their choices and is designed to help them make better choices? And better is objective. How many people realise that using the microwave is considerably more energy efficient than using the hob or using the... Well, anyone, actually, who's actually watching the meter as the electricity is being used. If you've got thermostats on your radiators so that you can control how hot they are, how much heat comes into the room. If you're not in a room for a long time, you can turn the radiator off. The one for me that I found interesting, I'd love to know what the numbers are on this, was dusting the back of the fridge. Just make sure Boris Johnson's not in it first. But the coils on the back of the fridge. Keep them dust-free and it eases pressure on the motor. I'm trying to work out why. I imagine it's because you're heating up the dust, are you, or something? I don't know. Don't quote me on this. Same with light bulbs. Give your light bulbs a dust. Especially these days when they last for so long. Your light bulbs get dusty and that's going to affect energy usage. It maximises wattage. If you dust, I don't even know what that means. So how can Liz Truss say it's bad to tell me? To dust my... Oh, we shouldn't be telling him to dust his light bulbs. That's communism. That's not freedom. It's just baffling, isn't it? My friend Ian Lee is listening today. It reminds me that she did say something about motorway limits, didn't she? Did she said something about speed limits on motorways during her leadership hustings, during those interminable hustings? Clunk Click writes, Dom must have brought her out in a cold sweat. This is an advertising campaign encouraging you to wear a seatbelt in a car, or a safety belt, as you might also call it. It hugely increases your chances of surviving a road traffic. Oh, no, we shouldn't be telling people what to do. People want to drive around without seatbelts on. They should be free to do so. It's just, of all the things that I don't understand, and all of the, quotes, ideologies, end quotes, that I hate, this is right up there. It may even be, I suppose, racism aside, it may even, does that qualify as an ideology? I suppose it does. Everything qualifies as an ideology if there's an idea at the heart of it. This is the worst of all, and I hate not understanding things. I really do. 21 minutes after 11 is the time. Lorna is in Southampton. Lorna, what's going on?
Well, I don't know, James. I am sharing your confusion, and giving information to people is the exact opposite of the nanny state. I mean, arming people with information to do for themselves it's the fundamental basis of aspiration, which the Conservatives bang on about all the time. So I have no clue what's going on there at all.
So the nanny state would be the one that was coming round and turning down your thermostats, or limiting the amount of energy that you can use, or telling you that you can only eat this or you can only eat that. Giving you the information you need to make an informed choice yourself is the opposite of a nanny state.
The absolute opposite. I mean, what are they going to come after next? Schools, universities? I mean, they're all there giving people information so we can form.
Oh, they have already,
haven't
they? The National Trust. The National Trust is giving people information so that they can arrive at better informed opinions about the history of the houses that they're visiting. And the same people have got a massive problem with that. So they're not fans of freedom at all, are they?
They are not fans of freedom. They're fans of keeping us down, noses to the grindstone, doing what they want us to do to keep those pockets fat.
Yes, up to a point, Lord Copper. I get that. Why would someone like Liz Truss sign up to this? I mean, and you're not allowed to say she's stupid.
I wouldn't dream of saying that. She obviously isn't stupid. No. She's managed to get herself, voted in as by her party as a prime minister. I don't know, James.
No?
There is something going on there about personal ambition for herself. Power corrupts when you've got it. An absolute belief in that she is right. And I think it is. It's an absolute belief that she is right.
That could be that simple. I read an account that she finds someone who says something that she likes the sound of, and then that's it. All bets are off. Every other voice is silenced. Every other opinion is excluded from the room. She just keeps and she has surrounded herself with Tofton Street types who are telling her that nanny state. None of them would be able to really explain to us what the nanny state was, and if they tried, we'd point out what you've just said, that they're actually describing the opposite of an overly interventionist government.
I think it's a real problem when people in power don't have people giving them information, challenging their views and telling them what's going on out there. It becomes a real problem for us, and that's been a problem that the Conservative Party has followed through and amplified over recent years, and it's why we've got bad government.
It does seem to spring from something almost ghoulish or vampiric. And of course we use that phrase, I'm all right, Jack, a lot, and we probably don't stop to think about what it really means often enough. But people who are all right, Jack, and who think that there is something wrong about money being spent, public money being spent on looking after people who are not all right, whether it's a provision of goods and services or whether it's a provision of information. It's possibly as simple as, I don't want to spend money on it. She's got nothing against public information campaigns if they're free. She doesn't actually have any problem with telling people what to do, as we members of the Anti-Greed Coalition discovered during her conference speech. But she doesn't want to spend money on it because, who knows, maybe she is she's obviously not sponsored directly by the kind of people that fund the think tanks, but she is employing hundreds of people who were. Brian, thank you, Lorna. Brian makes a good point. Giving people useful information leaves them open to having to take responsibility for actually looking after other people. The entire Tory ethos is to let the market decide and in turn let people look after themselves. Shirking responsibility is at the heart of it all. Yeah, that fits, doesn't it? That helps. Ian's in Ipswich. Ian, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Bear with me. I'm super nervous.
Go on.
So I think there's a danger that if you go around telling the working class they have to conserve electricity...
not telling them that they have to, just telling them how they could do.
How they could.
Yeah.
They're going to be looking at these big 6-bedroom houses in the next street over who have a swimming pool running off an air source heat pump.
Yeah.
They've got lights everywhere. They're using a hell of a lot of consumption. They can afford to do so, and potentially there's a danger of... people sort of rising up and saying, you need to turn that swimming pool off. Well, I don't want to. I can afford to use it. We'd end up, like you say, in
I see where you're going with this. It's quite complex, actually, isn't it? Because it's about a psychological... because there's two things going on. It's about preserving resources.
Yes.
But... what you've reminded us of, preserving people who can afford to use the resources should be preserving them as well. So if there's an ideology behind this free market vampirism, it would be, if I've got the money, I can do whatever the hell I want. Why should I have to preserve resources if I can afford them? And if you're encouraging other people to preserve their resources, whether they can afford to do it or not, people who are, I'm all right, Jack, to a weapons-grade degree and refuse. I mean, some of them even deny that preserving resources is necessary or that climate change is real, and they're often hand in hand with exactly the people that we're talking about today. It draws attention to them, to the people who are almost relishing in their use of energy, the people who boast about flying everywhere, the people who take it as a personal affront when Greta Thunberg explains some science to them.
Yes.
Ah, that was good.
Just a theory.
Just a theory. I thought you said a fairy at the top there. I thought, what's he on about now? It's a very good thing. I mean, listen, in the absence of a proper explanation, if they're just telling us that Truss has got an ideology, then we are free, aren't we? Nature abhors a vacuum, and into that vacuum anything will move. But that's one of the most compelling theories yet, because, of course, it takes it right back to the think tanks, to the Tufton Street, to the whole notion of what are these people? Why have they got an anti-climate change organisation in the same building as the anti-tax answer? It all speaks to the same thing. I've got a ton of money, therefore I should be able to do whatever the hell I want. And if you're going to have government-funded public information campaigns encouraging people to behave in a responsible fashion, not only are my tax dollars going to pay for it, but also it's going to make me look really bad because I'm refusing to do any of the things that the plebs are being encouraged to do by a government-funded campaign. Top of the class, I think, for Ian in Ipswich at the moment. That beautiful stuff. Alison's in Falkirk. Alison, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I was listening to the last caller, and that's very cynical, isn't it?
Yeah.
That actually all they're doing is protecting themselves.
But why would you fill Downing Street with people that have come from these weird organisations that refuse to tell us who pays their wages? If not, to allow them to continue the agenda that they were pursuing when their wages were being paid by anonymous plutocrats?
Yep, I don't disagree.
No?
I think what I was thinking is that it comes down to, I think I've heard it called the just world fallacy.
Go on.
That I can afford to do these things because I'm righteous. I work hard. I've earned my money. I've invested correctly.
You're absolutely right.
I look after myself.
Yes.
With the assumption that if you're struggling, it's because you're not righteous.
We get these calls from people who are, and they're not bad people. They've just fallen into this particular mindset where they think that because they've ended up doing very well, it's because they've worked harder than everybody else. It's not. It doesn't involve any luck or even perhaps God-given talent or innate talent. It's just because they've worked harder than ever. I've worked bloody hard for that, and you sort of think, well, you haven't been down a coal mine, have you?
No, it's the idea that, they don't believe that there but for a sprinkling of bad luck could any of us be. That any of us can become ill with poor mental health. Any of us can have a disabled child in our family. Any of us can become addicted to alcohol.
Yeah, but no, we can't. We're insulated from it.
That's right, because we're righteous.
And we work so hard.
Yeah. So why would I bother to spend money on a public health campaign? Because anybody with any common sense, as said by Mr. Rees-Mogg, would know to turn a radiator off and to turn down their thermostat.
Oh, you put me in a very uncomfortable position of having to defend Rees-Mogg on this one occasion, is that he's actually in favour of this particular public information campaign and had actually signed off on it. We're back to the rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate, aren't we? This is how it's meant to be. It's a natural order. God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate. Of course he didn't. It's ridiculous to suggest that. But if you're in the castle, you're going to love the theory. You're going to love the theory that it's all ordained by the divine, by the Almighty, aren't you?
But it's worse than that. It's that they don't believe that they are privileged, that other people can't also achieve that. And, actually they can't.
They have... What do we say? They were born 3-0 up, and they think they've scored a hat-trick.
That's the one.
I love it. And you're right. I think it does define them. It describes them. It absolutely distills them. The deserving and the undeserving poor. And it's a horrible, horrible ideology that is so overrepresented in British politics and media. They're queuing up to tell you that the hard-working, the poor are there entirely through their own fault, or people who haven't got enough to live on. What did Jake Berry say this week? Just go out and get another job. Yeah, they're lovely, aren't they? 11:31 is the time. Dominic Ellis is here now with the headlines. 25 minutes to 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where you have heard for the last couple of weeks my, I hope not overly optimistic analysis that the mood music or the noises coming out of both the UK, the EU and Ireland suggested, and I think possibly rather more quietly, but very importantly America, suggested that there may be some meaningful progress on the so-called Northern Ireland Protocol in the not-too-distant future. Unfortunately, we can't really rely on British media, or certainly not British newspapers, to analyse these sort of matters, because almost all of them encouraged you to vote for Brexit and are therefore increasingly desperate for you to stop hearing about the consequences or the realities of what they did, what they inflicted upon the country and indeed the population. So we will once again turn to Ireland, where Tony Connolly is, of course, the Europe editor of the state broadcaster RTE, as well as the author of Brexit and Ireland and the co-presenter of the Brexit Republic podcast. Are you going to throw cold water on our cautious optimism, Tony?
No, I don't think I would, James. I mean, I think there is definitely a new mood of optimism that is partly well-founded in that I think the UK is going to seriously engage with some of the EU's proposals, and Liz Truss, I think, is under pressure from the Biden administration as well to negotiate her way out of this problem rather than take unilateral action. And the way the talks have been structured at the moment between both sides is a lot more dynamic and I think can be a lot more productive than what was happening last year and right up to February.
I mean, I don't want to... I know, well, you won't speculate unduly, but the pressure from the White House, perhaps the biggest game changer, or more so than the change of personnel in Downing Street?